Talmud Talks. It is now time to begin. So I'd like to welcome everyone to Talmud Talks. And I'm so glad I have a full screen of people. So that is really wonderful. And we will continue with our discussion. But I did leave you with a question last time. And that question was thinking about our relationship to God in terms of a friendship relationship and how that might structure the way we pray or the way we think about God, the way we want to talk about our experience with the divine. Is it a helpful? Is it a not helpful expression? Is it a limiting expression? Is it a freeing expression? What would it mean to consider God as a friend? Isn't it? No, it's a very powerful metaphor.
Rabbi, it dovetails nicely with the class that Catherine is giving on God as a metaphor. And I found it very helpful when you talked about God as a friend, God just as a listener. It kind of took me out of the mindset of the transactional attitude that I really feel that was underscoring some of my ideas of God, and just put me in a whole different vantage point. So it's very helpful for me.
You know, Rabbi, when you talked about, I guess it was at the end of January, does God listen to our prayers or does God answer our prayers? And I thought a lot about that. We talked about therapy and the need today for so many people to listen to us, but you know, like a friend, God listens to us. Our friends don't solve our problems or bring about a solution, but they listen and they perhaps let us work out a better understanding or a solution, or just being able to have someone to support us.
Sam, you had a few words.
I hope this isn't too academic and or too heretical.
Neither are those are both values. So
both values. Okay. So the term friend to me applies an entity with agency, with the power to affect my life, the world. And one of my pet issues or ideas is the idea of theodicy, of the existence of God given the tremendous amount of evil in the world.
Okay, the issue of God's justice is theodicy.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I mean, so I have trouble reconciling an idea of God with that amount of agency with, for example, Kishinev or the Holocaust or any of those things.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's why I don't say God is anything. That's why I want to use this as a metaphor that is helpful perhaps in talking about God. When I think about lots of these issues, I think about, when we use the word God, we're using all sorts of values or ideas that we sort of can draw on. None is complete in itself, but sometimes we need to focus on God's justice. Sometimes we need to focus on God as love. Sometimes we need to focus on God as stability, such as God as a rock. Sometimes we need to focus on God as a friend. So it's different maybe aspects of the divine that can be helpful, that we have sort of a theology or spiritual toolbox. And the more tools we have there, the better off we are. If we just have one definition, that's sort of limiting. I think the idiom is, if you only have a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
I like that spiritual toolbox. That's
So the more images we can put in that toolbox, we can sort of pull out and use when we need it, and everyone is in itself incomplete. So yes, if you talk about God as someone with agency, then there are limits. If you think about God as just sort of the force for good in the universe, there's limits to that too. If you think of God as the creator, there's limits to that. How does that one who's beyond it before creation relate to creation? So that's why I asked, how is it helpful and when is it helpful? And there are going to be times when it's not helpful. And I think that's okay. I don't know, is that sort of does that give you some, doesn't answer the question of theodicy. That's like
yeah, it's certainly the idea of a toolbox or of God meaning different things at different times, or stuff like that is definitely very useful.
Yeah. The other thing is, when someone tells me what God is, that's really telling me who they are, or at least what tools they're using to talk about God. So it's really a good description of where an individual is, or a community is, or a society is, the way they structure the divine world.
I wonder, Rabbi, if traditional Jews and traditional Christians, who it looks like to me that it's so easy for them to talk about God and know what place God has in their lives. I mean, am I right? Do they question?
Well, you can't talk about traditional Jews and traditional Christians in the same breath, because they just think, Jews do God talk differently.
Yeah, true.
Certain communities will sort of give more emphasis on certain images of the divine. Certain language will be more prevalent in certain communities. Sometimes members of these communities, get in trouble when they're so fixed to that issue, and that causes great distress.
Mm-hmm.
And causes people maybe even to abandon, because it doesn't work and they don't have alternative images.
Rabbi, can you give an example of that?
I think Sam did. If God is always just, and you see something horrible happen, to a person that doesn't deserve it. It could be in the broad terms like Holocaust. Why did the Holocaust happen? Or even more individual terms, when your neighbor's kid gets run over by a car. Mm-hmm. Drunk driving thing. Why do bad things happen to good people? Is a really big question. That can be a faith-breaking question. Okay. People who usually survive that in even traditional societies, they start focusing on other aspects of God, as God is the one who comforted me in the during that sense of loss. God is the one who gave me hope or gave me support. Those things would be, so they're pulling out maybe subconsciously other images of the divine. So that seems to be how I think it would work, Tula.
Okay.
So, and then we have ideas. What is it? What is the Jewish image of the God who suffers with us? That's a interesting image. We see it in Christianity. We see it very much in Judaism. Mm-hmm. God goes into exile with the Jewish people. That's really nice, but then you have a very self-limiting God. So in one way, it's nice to have God with you. On the other hand, why the hell did you let the exile happen? So it's so that even within, I think, within traditional people who can do this, they also have their own toolbox, whether they're aware of it or not. And when someone says let's say they don't believe in God, my first question, either one that I would ask myself or depending on the nature of the conversation, ask them, is tell me about the God you don't believe in. Because that may be the God I'm not believing in right now, or that may be the metaphor that just doesn't work right now. Now, they may not think that, this is nice to have this type of toolbox of sort of framing the world, and that's a different issue. But lots of times they're just, rejecting what I would consider limited theology. Now, you can do that easily from a Jewish point of view, because getting God, a definition of God straight isn't all that important, so long as one keeps a monotheistic principle. So the real structure limited in Jewish theological talk is that there is divine is some sort of, there has to be one unique, unified sense. So we don't like dualism, we don't like polytheism, we don't like different forces in heaven. We don't like ultimate, everything has to be resolved in some way, and that there's a sense of oneness. So that would be a limit to Jewish theological discussion. But I think beyond that, there's really little that, that is so helpful. So, and then when you take an image like God is creator, that gives you a lot of things. What does it mean to create? What does creation mean now? And things like that. What did it mean 2,000 years ago? What did it mean 500 years ago? God's sovereignty. What is the best difference to talk about God as sovereign? Does the word king work in a democratic society? So I mean that's all. But sometimes it's sort of helpful. So that's the idea of, that's why I talk like the idea of toolbox. But I think there is that Jewish limitation of oneness of God. You can't go beyond that, and it's a pretty strict oneness. And even in Kabbalah, when you have the system of divine energy flowing through the Sephirot, you can't worship any one of these pools of energy. You can only worship the one God. Even though you may experience the transition to divine energy from beyond to this world, which is one of the problems I mentioned, it's all one. You just can't pray to Tiferet, God's glory. Traditional Judaism has so traditional, I mean, not necessarily Orthodox people today, but I mean traditional coming our heritage. We have a host of heaven. We have a beautiful images of a well-populated spiritual realm, and you just don't pray to anyone. You don't pray to Elijah. You don't pray to Metaron. You don't pray to any of the archangels. They're part of a spiritual creation that doesn't have a lot of strength these days, but for many generations did. Okay, so that's how it works. God is friends. Let's go into screen share and see where we get from that. Let's see. I think it's this one. Okay, so the question was last week. About how do we think about relationship with God?
The story about the two rabbis.
Yeah, did you look that up?
Was very interesting. Yes, I did. And I think that the message of the story was that you can't let, I forget the Hebrew name for the negative spirit, to
Yetzer hara.
You can't let that overtake you, because I think the thing that destroyed their friendship was the appearance of competition
Sure.
between them.
So let's go. So this is the relationship between Rabbi. Do you remember the two guys?
Oh my goodness. Yochanan and Rabbi Kishu.
Reish Lakish.
Reish Lakish.
Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Reish Lakish, they became close friends, and then they were jealous. Basically, Yochanan was jealous of his student and friend Reish Lakish, brother-in-law Reish Lakish, and they broke the relationship, which was devastating to both of them. And it's really a very sad story.
Yes, and I think in modern terms, since there's such division amongst political viewpoints, I've had to say to myself on more than one occasion, my friendship is way more important than making my point across politically.
Yeah. Sometimes friendship is more important than being right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that if you haven't looked up that story, everyone, it's the story of Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. It's a very, very famous story. It, gives you a lot of insights, not only into the nature of friendship, but from a socio-historical point of view, issues of how marriage worked, how male-male bonding worked. And you'll see that it's talking about a world that is, much different than what we have today, and understanding how relationships were structured. But it's also, as Judy said, a really important discussion of relationship. Thank you for doing that, Judy.
Oh, you're welcome.
Good,
Thank you for putting that forth.
It's one of the big stories
Yeah.
of the Talmud. Okay, 26. I'll start by reading. It was also stated by an Amara, Rabbi Chia bar Ashai, said that Rav said, although the sages said, oh my God, that one requests his personal needs in a blessing, who listens to prayer. We had that prayer, Shema Tefillah, at the end of the Amidah. If he comes to add and recite additional requests after completing his Amidah prayer, even if his personal requests are the equivalent of the order of the confessions of Yom Kippur, he may recite them. Okay, so Rabbi Chisa said that Rav said that basically after the Amidah, you can just go on forever putting in your requests. You know how long the Yom Kippur confessions are. We have two major confessions. We have the alphabetical one and the Al-Chet. Yes, and it goes on and on and on and on. So you can just let your heart go, Rav said, after you finish the Amidah. Once you do what you got to do, so the Amidah set prayer, it's pretty free. Okay, so that finishes that section. I like that note, but we're going to another screen share. So I'm going to stop this one. And we'll go into, let's open up this guy. Come on. Hannah's prayer. Now, this is a biblical text. And it's a long biblical text. We have two chapters here. And one is sort of a narrative introduction. The other is the prayer. And I'd like to just read that so the story, we recall the story and then look at the prayer. And then today and next week, we will go and look at the way the sages in the Talmud use Hannah's prayer and Hannah's backstory as a way of understanding how we or how they saw prayer. So would someone like reading the story of Hannah?
I'll read it.
Okay, and we'll just read through until I tell you to stop. So I'll be rude.
Okay. This was always very moving for me.
And me.
Right, because I went through infertility. So I really
Yep.
This touched my heart. There was a man
Absolutely.
from Ramathon of the Zuphites in the hill country of Ephraim, whose name was Elkanah, son of Jeroham, son of Elihu, son of Tohu, son of Zuph, an Ephraimite. He had 2 wives, one named Hannah and the other Peninnah. Peninnah had children, but Hannah was childless. This man used to go up from his town every year to worship and to offer sacrifice to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh of hosts at Shiloh. Hophni and Phinehas, the 2 sons of Eli, were priests of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh there. One such day, Elkanah offered a sacrifice. He used to give portions to his wife Peninnah and to all her sons and daughters, but to Hannah, he would give 1 portion. Though Hannah was his favorite, for Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh had closed her womb. Moreover, her rival, to make her miserable, would taunt her that Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh had closed her womb. This happened year after year. Every time she went up to the house of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, the other would taunt her so that she wept and would not eat.
Okay, let's stop for a minute. Just this sounds like a really bad relationship. I just can't imagine what's wrong with Peninnah that she feels that way. Though the Hebrew word for co-wife is zara. I see your hand, Mark. And zara can mean trouble or enemy. And you may know the Yiddish version of tzara or tzarot, which is tsuris.
Oh, okay.
So even the biblical language indicated that in that period there was something unstable about a polyamorous relationship. That's just a little bit. And here you can see at this instance in the relationship of Elchanan and his 2 wives, there's something that's not going on very well. And most of our biblical examples of polygamous marriage, they're not generally great examples. Now, you could always argue that it's always the bad story that gets into the news. So there may have been lots and lots of wonderful ones, but the ones that we know about were very troublesome. Okay, Mark.
Well, Rabbi, you had asked about Peninnah being so mean and difficult for her rival. I think that's it right there. It's a very common thing because Hannah was the favorite of Elchanan, and therefore Peninnah was going after her in any way that she could.
Okay, so we also saw how favoritism, there are lots of biblical stories that talk about how favoritism messes things up in a family. What's the best family children story that you know about how favoritism messes up everything?
Where should I start? Joseph
Cain
is a good way to
Jacob and
start.
Esau.
Joseph is a
Cain
good
and
one.
Abel.
Joseph.
Yeah, there are lots of them. We don't know about Cain and Abel. We do know about Joseph. Yeah. So we do have, playing favorites doesn't work. So whatever the case is, let's continue. So we're going to start off with verse 8. So Pam, you're reading beautifully.
Her husband Elkanah said to her, Hannah, why are you crying and why aren't you eating? Why are you so sad? Am I not more devoted to you than 10 sons? After they had eaten and drunk at Shiloh, Hannah rose. The priest Eli was sitting on the seat near the doorpost of the temple of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. In her wretchedness, she prayed to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, weeping all the while. And she made this vow, O Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh of hosts, if you look upon the suffering of your maidservant and will remember me and not forget your maidservant, and if you will grant your maidservant a male child, I will dedicate him to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh for all the days of his life, and no razor shall ever touch his head.
Okay, so this is, he is being committed as a Nazir, someone dedicated to God, and here as a Nazir for life, which is unusual only because the Torah examples is that being a Nazir, someone dedicated to God, is a time-limited dedication. So he's not ever going to get a haircut. And let's go on, Pam.
As she kept on praying before Yud He Vav He, Eli watched her mouth. Now Hannah was praying in her heart. Only her lips moved, but her voice could not be heard. So Eli thought she was drunk. Eli said to her, "How long will you make a drunken spectacle of yourself?" And Hannah replied, "Oh no, my Lord. I am a very unhappy woman. I have drunk no wine or other strong drink, but I have been pouring out my heart to Yud He Vav He. Do not take your maidservant for a worthless woman. I have only been speaking all this time out of my great anguish and distress."
So since we're talking about prayer within the tractate about prayer, Barachot, what are the points that you see here in terms of Hannah's prayer? How is she praying, and what is the feeling behind her prayer? And on the other hand, why is that passion? What does Eli misunderstand?
Well, he thinks she's drunk
She
because
thinks,
she's praying in her heart, as the text said. Only her lips move, but they couldn't hear her voice.
okay. And how was she praying? No, this is pretty passionate prayer, right?
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
really from her heart. She was just crying in a way.
Yeah, she's praying. And so we have this idea that where does prayer come from? Where's the center of prayer?
Heart.
Yeah.
Isn't that what we talked about, is it kavanah, intention?
We talked a little bit about that of Kavanah. Yeah, that's a way of doing it. But here, this is, again, Hannah's our first big prayer. So this is going to, you picked it out, Pam, one idea of Kavanah, this idea, it has to come from the heart. And she's speaking out of her great anguish and distress. Merov sichi v'kas'i debarti ad hena. So this is like of the greatness. So she's, there's passion here. It's in the heart. There's something very personal about this too, isn't it? There's something private about this type of prayer.
That she says, out of my great anguish and distress.
Yeah.
She wouldn't want to share that in front of a congregation. She would be doing that privately.
Yeah.
Or even in front of her husband, and certainly not in front of Penina.
Sure. And Eli is just a total failure in terms of pastoral counseling.
To say the least.
Yeah. So he doesn't come off really well, though he tries to make up. So someone else like to keep reading?
I'll read.
Okay. So Mark, you can read.
"Then go in peace," said Eli, "and may the God of Israel grant you what you have asked of him." She answered, "You are most kind to your handmaid." So the woman left, and she ate, and was no longer downcast. Early next morning, they bowed low before Yud He Vav He, and they went back to Ramah. Elkanah knew his wife Hannah, and Yud He Vav He remembered her. Hannah conceived, and at the turn of the year, she bore a son. She named him Samuel, meaning I asked Yud He Vav He for him. And when the man Elkanah and all his household were going up to offer Yud He Vav He the annual sacrifice and his votive sacrifice, Hannah did not go up. She said to her husband, "When the child is weaned, I will bring him. For when he has appeared before Yud He Vav He, he must remain there for good." Her husband Elkanah said to her, "Do as you think best. Stay home until you have weaned him. May Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh fulfill his word." So the woman stayed home and nursed her son until she weaned him. When she weaned him, she took him up with her, along with 3 bulls, 1 ephah of flour, and a jar of wine. And though the boy was still very young, she brought him to the house of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh at Shiloh.
Okay, so what do you think about Elkanah's social status? First, we had this.
Very
Yeah.
prominent.
Yeah, why would you think he's prominent?
His gifts, the gifts that he's giving, or
Yeah, they're pretty big gifts, 3 bulls and ephah and a jar of wine. We also have in the beginning his full genealogy. So,
Right.
we have his yichus. And he could also afford 2 wives.
That's right.
So he is a prominent man. So this is sort of they're all sort of upper class people.
And also back then, children were needed to work, on the farm or, help contribute to the family. And here he's being given as a priest and is being taken away for good.
Yeah, so they could afford to get rid of the child. I mean, there are lots of things, he's as good as, 10 sons. I mean, there are lots of reasons to think that Elchanan is a very high, sort of as pretty high on the social level. Also, he's getting direct contact with the priest. But that's just sort of interesting. So let's continue. Mark, you want to continue?
Sure. After slaughtering the bull, they brought the boy to Eli. She said, "Please, my lord, as you live, my lord, I am the woman who stood here beside you and prayed to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. It was this boy I prayed for, and Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh has granted me what I asked of him. I, in turn, hereby lend him to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. For as long as he lives, he is lent to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh." And they bowed low before Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh.
Yeah. So there's a lot of very interesting things going on to the story. One of the things I always notice is that it's very clear that the only God here is Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, and that for Hannah and for Elkanah, for their family, they are all tied into Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. The only person who doesn't use the word Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh is Eli. He says, "May the God of Israel." I don't know what to make with that, except that maybe it's to emphasize the identification of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh with the God of Israel. So this is, Hannah's prayer.
I'm interested. Let's see, because I'm seeing in front, I might have jumped ahead and I don't mean to.
It's okay.
But in terms of lending him to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh for as long as he lives, as opposed to giving him to, back to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. Also, the other part is what happens after he dies, because after he dies, there's still that connection that's not part of life, but there's a different connection. So for me, that's confusing.
It is confusing. We do know that something happens to Samuel, after he dies. And that's part of the story at the end of Saul's life. Shaul HaMelech, who is right before the final battle with the Philistines, needs to go to get information. He's not getting information from the prophets, nor from the Urim and Tumim, the divining dice, or any other way. So he goes to the wise woman of Endor, who brings up Shmuel's spirit from Sheol, from the underworld. So that's a good question.
Wow.
But he's also, Shmuel is pretty upset that he's bothered from his rest. and delivers pretty terrible news to Shaul HaMelech, to King Saul. The Hebrew word here is interesting. It's so she asked, She'alti, and she is going to use this word hish'ilatihu. The word to ask is an interesting word because we saw it, I guess, not in last week's, the weeks before's Torah portion, when the Israelites asked, quote, the Egyptians for gold and silver, for all sorts of riches, and the Egyptians gave it to them. So one is the active, the word of, the first word is really, I have asked, and the other form related to that is to lend. So that's what's going on here. She asks, and the reverse of that is to lend. So you ask to borrow, and then you lend.
But she's also not cutting her connection to the child.
That's also important. He's still the child.
Mm-hmm.
You know. It also may be saying that there's no permanent priesthood assigned to this child. No, he's not permanently, that is forever attached. He's not going to be a priest per se, or he's not going to be a priest in the way that he will displace Eli's children. That's a very good question. And we can spend a lot of time doing that, but I'm not. So excuse me. So let's read Hannah's prayer. This is Hannah's psalm. So this is a psalm associated with Hannah. Would someone care to read this?
I'll read.
Yeah.
And Hannah prayed, my heart exults in Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. I have triumphed through you, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. I gloat over my enemies. I rejoice in your deliverance. There is no holy one like Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. Truly, there is none besides you. There is no rock like our God. Talk no more with lofty pride. Let no arrogance cross your lips. For Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh is an all-knowing God. By him, actions are measured. The bows of the mighty are broken, and the faltering are girded with strength. Those once sated must hire out for bread. Those once hungry hunger no more. While the barren woman bears 7, the mother of many is forlorn. Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh deals death and gives life, casts down into Sheol and raises up. Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh makes poor and makes rich. He casts down, he also lifts high. God raises the poor from the dust, lifts up the needy from the dunghill, setting them with nobles, granting them seats of honor. For the pillars of the earth are Yud-Heh-Vav-Hehs. God has set the world upon them. God guards the step of God's faithful, but the wicked perish in darkness. For not by strength shall a person prevail. The foes of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh shall be shattered. He will thunder against them in the heavens. Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh will judge the ends of the earth. God will give power to God's king and triumph to God's anointed one. Then Elkanah went home to Ramah, and the boy entered the service of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh under the priest Eli.
Okay. So this is a psalm that's put into Hannah's prayer. How do you get a sense that this psalm probably wasn't written by Hannah? That's not a hard question. It's right here. V'titen oz l'malcho v'yaram keren mishicho. God will give power to God's king and triumph to God's anointed one. There's no king in the time of Hannah. Her son, I mean, it could see as prophetic because her son, Shmuel, will anoint two kings. So you can get around it that way. Both Shaul HaMelech, King Saul, and David HaMelech, King David. So it could be prophetic, but this is sort of an interesting thing. Do you like the psalm?
I think it's more of a prayer. That this is what she would like to see, or what should happen.
Okay.
Because
well,
none of us would like to, we would all like to see a peaceful and more unified world.
Yeah, it has that. You have God. She starts off, I'm starting off to praise with God. We're not going through a psalm study, but there's a declaration of prayer, who God is. Pray, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, Hashem is just phenomenal. I'm praising Hashem. Hashem is unique. And here the image of God is Tzur,
The
rock. Yeah, it's a nice image. Tzur Yisrael is a common thing, the rock of Israel. And then you talk about how God is, how Hashem is all powerful and don't be pride. And then there's the idea that the wicked who are wealthy are going to be overthrown, that there's going to be a reversal of fortune. An interesting line here is Hashem is the one who memit mechayeh, the one who brings death and the one who brings life. And then Morid Sha'ol V'Ya'al, who casts down to the underworld, to Sheol, and then raises up.
Yeah, for most of this, except for talking about the barren woman and the mother of many, this sounds like a warrior's prayer.
Yeah, it could be. It's
Like a very masculine in feel.
yeah. Now that doesn't mean women won't be saying masculine prayers.
No, but still, I
Yeah.
mean, in terms of imagining how things would have been at this time, this really does not seem like a prayer, of a mother.
No, it doesn't seem like a prayer of a mother. You might see maybe Devorah, the prophetess who's leading Israel into battle. She may
Right.
like this psalm, but it doesn't seem like a mom who's just dedicated her kids. So that gives us a sense that this psalm was sort of probably a very popular psalm that was put into the story.
Also, she talks about gloating over her enemies. She didn't like it so much when Penina was gloating over her sorors.
And we don't have any record of Hannah turning the tables. She seems quite nice. She drops the kid off, and we don't hear any more about Elchanan or Penina or Hannah. But it's a nice thing. God raises the poor from the dust, lifts the needy from the dunghill, from the ashpot. That would be the poor people lived in the dumps. That's, I think, how we would see it. I don't know if you have to say they're literally living on the trash, but they live in the trashy part of town. And you get to eat with the things, and then a little creation thing. Then a nice thing, God guarding the steps of the faithful, and this like kilo bekoach yigbar ish, that not by strength shall a man be a gever, will do well. God thundering, and then they go home. So that's our poem. So I just want you to keep that in mind as we go into our next section. And we'll get into a little bit for the next 15 minutes today, and then we will continue. see. Where's my share thing? Share screen. Do I have this one? Okay. Stop share. Share screen. Okay. So here we are, Rav Hamuna. And early Amora. So someone want to read what he's going to tell us. Amar Rav Hamuna. Do I volunteer up here?
Sorry, I'll volunteer.
Okay.
Rav Hamnuna said, how many significant halachot can be derived from these verses of the prayer of Hannah? As it says, and Hannah spoke in her heart, only her lips moved and her voice could not be heard. So Eli thought her to be drunk. The Gemara elaborates, from that which is stated here, and Hannah spoke in her heart. The halacha that one who prays must focus his heart on his prayer is derived.
Okay, so this is interesting. One is that Rabbi Steinsaltz is telling us that this is a matter of halacha. And halacha is Jewish law. So it means it's pretty strong. This is more than just a suggestion. It's telling you when you gotta pray, you have to focus your heart. And Pam, are you there? Because you made this here. I don't know how your Hebrew reading skills are right at this moment, but if you can see the word that I've just highlighted.
Yeah, shechol.
Before that, it goes mikan lemit palel, the one who prays, zarik shekave, shekave libo. And this is your word for getting the word to focus. So you mentioned that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kavana. So you got it right. You intuited Rav Hamuna.
Yeah, I remember that discussion about intention. As a matter of fact, I think it came up in Torah study recently too.
Oh, good. I mean, it's a pretty big Jewish thing.
Yeah.
But here you are required to have kavanah. Okay. And what's the next thing?
And from that which is stated here, only her lips moved. The halacha that one who prays must enunciate the words with his lips, not only contemplate them in his heart, is derived.
Okay, so
you not only have to make it obvious that you're praying.
That's right. You just can't have a prayer in your heart. You have to say it. So you can't just say. You have to say. You have to at least slightly vocalize it. You have to externalize it to some extent. But
from that which is written here, and her voice could not be heard, the halacha that one is forbidden to raise his voice in his Amida prayer, as it must be recited silently.
okay. So you have to articulate it in some way, but you have to do it quietly. Now, why do you think that?
Privacy.
Privacy, that's good.
So it doesn't become a competition.
Yeah, that's good. Any other reasons why you might think it's a good, this is a good law?
I think that when you're doing this privately, instead of shouting it out, um, your intentions are more focused. Whereas if to me, once you start singing out, I'm going to say singing out because it's easy for me to articulate that way.
Yeah.
Your focus is outward, not inward. Your focus is to other people.
Yeah.
And
That's good.
I would add on a practical thing, at the same time, if you enunciate loudly and everyone else around you is enunciating loudly, no one can concentrate on their own prayers.
That's right. That's all tied in. Yeah.
Mhm.
So Hannah has taught us how to pray. Okay. Let's continue.
From the continuation of the verse here, so Eli thought her to be drunk. The halakha that a drunk person is forbidden to pray. That is why he rebuked her.
Okay, mikan shesikor asur lihitpalel. You can't pray when you're drunk. So what does that mean?
Except on Purim.
Are you praying on Purim? And you really have to, you can't be so drunk,
Right,
you know, that you have to be able to hear the Megillah.
right.
Yeah, and there's a lot of, there's some discussion on how much you have to drink. And the tradition that I come from says you drink until you are basically, let's say, unable to, if you were out to dinner, you would have difficulty figuring the tip on the bill. That's where you're supposed to be. That you can't you can't easily do the gematria for Haman and Mordechai. That's what it means that you don't know the difference. So you're not supposed to get overly drunk, just very comfortable. Obviously, there's some people who feel otherwise, but I think they're wrong and hold them in disdain. But that they're breaking Jewish law and doing terrible things on this holy day. But that's okay. You're not supposed to be drunk. So if you're praying during that part of the day, you can't be drunk. So that goes to the first thing. You have to have intention.
Mhm.
Alcohol is also, being drunk is a person who is also possessed by another spirit. Would be in the ways they were thinking about it. You know, the spirit of the wine took over you. So you weren't really dedicated to God. There was something pulling you away from the divine. Some more.
On the subject of Eli's rebuke of Hannah, as it is stated, and Eli said to her, "How long will you remain drunk? Remove your wine from yourself." Rabbi Eliezer said, "From here the halakha that one who sees in another
Here we are. We'll continue here.
an unseemly matter, he must reprimand him, is derived. And Hannah answered, and she said, "No, my master, I am a woman of sorrowful spirit, and I have drunk neither wine nor liquor, but I pour out my soul before the Lord."
Okay, so let's just start right here. So here we have an interesting thing, the obligation to correct someone. So if you think someone is doing something wrong, one is obligated to warn them. So it's arik lahochihu. Hochacha is an important Jewish value. Now, the whole issue is, how do you do hochacha in a way that someone will listen to you and not slug you in the face? Is really delicate, but you have to be able to address people so that they can hear you, so they can receive correction or direction. I don't think Eli was the best on that.
Right.
But so you see someone doing something that is wrong in all different ways, you need to find a way of telling them. Now, this has some idea, even in Jewish legal practice, that if you see someone about to commit a crime, you should tell them. So, if you think someone's embezzling, you better tell them. I think that's going to be illegal.
How far does your obligation go?
I think it goes to telling them.
You think that once you say, I think that's, using your example, I think that's going to be illegal, you've fulfilled your obligation and it's now up to the perpetrator?
Yeah. I think that's usually, again, because you're not responsible for his change of behavior. You're just responsible that he knows that it's, that there's a potential danger here. So if you see someone who's gossiping, you can say, no, this is getting very close to Lashon Hara. You've done your job. You shouldn't be listening after that, but you clearly have done your job and your friend will continue or not. It's a very tricky matter, and that's a whole different, this will keep us in a year of study, how to do tochacha in a responsible way, but just as a reminder. Now, we should continue. We have a few more minutes regarding the words. Here we go.
No, my master. Ula, and some say Rabbi Yossi, son of Rabbi Hanina, said that she said to him in an allusion, with regard to this matter, you are not a master, and the divine spirit does not rest upon you, as you falsely suspect me of this. So she's really putting him in his place.
Yeah, no, you're no master here. That's what Rabbi Ula said. And you're doing fine, Judy.
Some say another version of her response. She said to him, questioning, aren't you a master? Aren't the divine presence and divine spirit with you that you judged me to be guilty and you did not judge me to be innocent? Didn't you know that I am a woman of distressed spirit?
Okay, so I mentioned that I didn't think that Eli was very good as a pastoral counselor.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, the rabbis didn't think he did a good job either. And I like this because it also gives Hannah some agency. For me, in the story, she seems pretty passive there. And here she's really, staking her own ground. What kind of master are you? Lo Adonata. You're supposed to have the Shekhinah and the Ruach HaKodesh in you. And, obviously you don't. And I like this here, these two words of divine presence, Shekhinah and Ruach HaKodesh. So Shekhinah, the divine spirit, should be dwelling within the priest, and he should be inspired by the Holy Spirit. And he doesn't.
And if you're going to correct somebody, you need to do a little bit more than just a cursory look.
Yeah.
To see what's going on with them.
Yes.
Maybe there's a little bit more to the story than just gossip or embezzlement.
That's right. There's maybe, you need to do some study. That's put in here as well. Great. And let's read the last one at the number 3, and then we're gonna have to stop because we've been here for an hour, though I'd like to continue forever.
With regard to Hannah's explanation that I have drunk neither wine nor liquor, Rabbi Eliezer said, from here, the halakha is derived that one who is suspected of something of which he is not guilty cannot suffice merely with the personal knowledge of his innocence, but must inform the one who suspects him that he is innocent and clear himself of suspicion.
Okay, so we're going to stop there. So we're getting here into a little discussion of how to do tochacha, how to correct someone, and how that relationship could be. So I think what I'd like people to think about is, these two things so far. We have Hannah's prayer and Hannah's experience with Eli. So one thing we should think about is, think about Hannah's prayer and how using Hannah as a model. What does it mean to use Hannah as the model of Jewish prayer? And that's sort of an interesting thing, particularly, well, I'm not going to give you a lot of hints, but we're using Hannah and no other biblical character as our central. We've had Daniel before, we've had others, but this really long passage is about Hannah. Why is Hannah so important in Jewish prayer? What does that mean for us when we think about Jewish prayer? And why is Hannah sort of the patron saint of prayer? So that's our to be thinking about for next week. You could also think about how to do tochacha, how to do reprimand, but I'd like to focus primarily on that. So we'll get back next week. We'll continue. We'll talk a little bit about what you thought about over the past week. If you do your homework, it's okay if you don't. You don't get any credit, and then we'll move on. So let me just put that in so I remember where we ended, because if I don't do that, so we're ending on February 21st. And the question is, what does it mean that Hannah is the patron of prayer? Okay, good. So I'm all set for next week. Again, I'm going to continue studying. This is really nice.
Excellent.
I want to close the stop share so I get to see everyone who survived. It's now 2:33. I want to thank you all for coming. Cindy, I didn't welcome you. I didn't see you sneak in, so I'm sorry. But thank you so much. And Elliot too. Cindy, your music, your response is more musical than audible. So thank you. Anyway, everyone, be very well, be safe, be happy, be peaceful, and only good things. And I'll see you all next week, God willing. Bye-bye. And this Saturday, if you're coming to Torah study and spice up your Judaism, you got me. Okay.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye.
Be well, everyone.